Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to today's Virtual Village Hall. My name is Victoria Barton. I'm a librarian for Leicestershire Libraries, and what I'm hoping to do today is to take you through an example that will help us to use Ancestry Library Edition. And the reason for doing this is because Ancestry is a great tool for researching your own family history, but it is a little bit of a complicated tool. So what I'm hoping to do is to use an example of a local man, Joseph Atkins from Hinckley, so that we can look at the census records, look at the birth, marriage and death records, and we can maybe take a look at some other records that you could find, not with Joseph Atkins, but with some other examples if we get time as well towards the end of the session. So Ancestry Library Edition is a little bit different from Ancestry Home Edition that some of you might have been using if you have a subscription to it. One of the differences is that Ancestry Library Edition is free with a Leicestershire Library card. So well worth getting yourself a Leicestershire Library card. You can join online and then you can access it for free from home at the moment. They've actually made it available for free during the coronavirus crisis. Normally it would be accessed in the library. So well worth getting on there if you would like to use Ancestry to research your family history. The other main difference between Library Edition and Home Edition is Library Edition doesn't have as much functionality as Home Edition. So you won't find yourself able to make family trees on there, and it won't be suggesting different ancestors that you might, or family members that you might want to add to your family tree. It's purely just a searching tool. So that's what we'll be looking at today. Some of you might know that family history research is also called the study of genealogy. So a little bit of trivia for you there as well. I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you can see which website to go to. So here we've got the Leicestershire Libraries website. Just need to type in Family History Leicestershire Libraries, and then you will find this lovely website. Just scroll down a little bit till you get to Family History, and you'll see Ancestry Library Edition. And if you've got a Leicestershire Library card, you can click Ancestry Library Edition from home, and it will invite you to log in using the library card and PIN number that you've been provided with. Otherwise, if you're actually in a library, which hopefully we can all get back into libraries soon, you can log in to Ancestry from a Leicestershire library there as well. So let's move on and get ourselves onto the Ancestry Library Edition. Okay, so when you log into Ancestry Library Edition, this is the first screen that you will see appear in front of you. At this point, I just want to pause and talk a little bit about how you might want to organise your family history research when you've got that, when you've got some bits and bobs sorted out. So one top tip that I heard from a genealogist at the record office where I worked for a little while was to get a roll of wallpaper. And the reason for this is if you use A4 sheets instead of a roll of wallpaper, you'll find yourself sticking them together with sticky tape. And over time, as it can take many years to do your family history research, the sticky tape will degrade and you'll find your work gets lost. However, wallpaper tends to be quite high quality and you can keep rolling it out and adding to it, adding different branches on, really nice to make a nice big family tree on there as well. If you have a look as well on the BBC Family History site, it has now been archived, but it's got some really handy record sheets on there. It's got a pedigree chart on an A4 sheet that you could perhaps put in the front of a folder to summarise what you've found. And it's also got individual record sheets for each individual that you find information about. And what's useful about that is you can pop that in front of any evidence you collect about individuals, and like a birth certificate, marriage certificate, census records that you might have printed out and things. And then you've got that information at a glance as you're going through perhaps an A4 folder that you've created and things like that. Another top tip with family history research, if you are a beginner, is to perhaps start on researching the male line rather than the female line. And the reason for this, it might seem obvious, is because obviously in history especially, women would change their names as they married, and so it can be a bit trickier to research a female line as you're continually looking for changes of names. But we'll look into how to do that later when we take a look at birth, marriage and death records. So for now, I'm just going to start off by showing you how to search for a census record using Ancestry. So if we scroll down here, we always start by clicking begin searching. And the temptation is here, obviously, to put your ancestors' names straight into these search boxes and go right ahead and start searching right there and then. The problem that you'll find with that is that Ancestry contains records, hundreds and thousands of records from all over the world. So you're going to start getting up American records, European records, things like that that may not apply to you. So that's not as helpful as perhaps narrowing it down. So the first thing we need to do is to decide what records we'd like to search on Ancestry. And say you were searching your own family tree in this case, it would be a good idea to perhaps talk to some surviving family members and see what they know about names and dates, even if they're approximate. And that gives you some idea of what records to start searching on that might be likely to yield some results. So we're going to start here by searching the UK census collection, which I've clicked down this right-hand side under special collections. And again, though we've narrowed it down a bit here, we need to narrow it down even more from the UK census collection. And we need to search this time the 1901 England census. So I'm just scrolling down here on the page until I find a link to the 1901 England census. And you can see now at the top of the page exactly what we're searching, the 1901 England census and nothing else. So that's the only set of records that we're now searching. Before, if we'd typed into the first box, we would have been searching hundreds and thousands of records from all over the world, of all different kinds. But now we're just homing in on the census. So let's use our example of Joseph Atkins to search this. So I've typed his first name in the first and middle names box and his last name in the last names box there. And then I'm going to type Hinckley in the lived in box. And you can see how many different Hinkleys there are. There's one in Somerset, Maine, USA, Minnesota, a variety of places. But the one we're after is Hinckley, Leicestershire, England. So I'm going to click on that one. And if I scroll down this form, you can see how much information you could fill in here. But I find it best, at least to start off with, to keep it quite broad. I'll show you how to narrow down your search results in a moment. There is an orange search button at the top of the page here. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a nice orange search button at the bottom there. So if you did fill in lots of information on this form, then you could click the search button at the bottom. But for now, we're going to click the search button at the top as we've only filled in a limited amount of information. And here we go. Here's the results for Joseph Atkins, who lived in Hinckley, Leicestershire, that appear on the 1901 English census. So if we have a look on the left-hand side of the page, you can see where it says search filters. Now, if you weren't entirely sure of the name, perhaps he called himself Joe sometimes. Perhaps you're not sure it's Atkin or Atkins. You can create a different search by moving these filter bars from broad to exact. You can also do that for the lived in or any other information that you've popped in. Or if you've realized that you really want to do quite a different search, you can click on edit search and change that. And once you've moved these scroll bars as you wish, you then click update, and that will update your search results on the right hand side of the screen. So here on the right hand side of the screen, we've got our search results. Now, if this was your ancestor, you might have some information about them, for example, about how old they were in 1901, about when they were born, and you would use that information to and base your search off of that. So in this case, I know that this first record for Joseph Atkins is the correct one. So I'm going to click on View Record. And that takes us into a transcript of the census record, which has a lot of information listed there. So we can see his name's Joseph Atkins, age 67 on the 1901 census. And if we scroll down, there's even more information here. We can see the household members' names and ages as well. But what I'm going to do now, which is quite exciting, is have a look at the original census document by clicking this View button here. So what's appeared here is a actual photograph of the document that was taken in 1901. And that's a really exciting document, as you can see. It's an original first class resource, and also what's really good about it is how much information we've got about each person on the census, and I'll go through the columns in a moment and let you know what each of them mean. You might have noticed that there's a lot of crossings out and ticks on the census document, and the reason for that is that this was a working document. So under the profession or occupation column, for example, you can see that a lot of things are crossed out, and that's not because they're incorrect or anything like that. It's probably just because the person using the document was counting the number of, say, hosiery warehouse people, or, for example, or home workers on there, and they were slashing through there with their pen to show that they counted those items. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see perhaps a little better the headings on each column. So we start on the left here with the road, street, name of house, etc. And then we've got some information on whether the houses were inhabited or uninhabited. In this notable column here, we've got the name and surnames of each person. Now, the way that these are listed, it's the head of the household first. So that was usually, but not necessarily, the eldest male person in the household, usually father to the children and the wife there, husband to the wife there in the household. However, it could be perhaps a widow, or it could be a lady living alone. So don't always count on that, but more often than not, you will see the eldest male listed as the head of the household. And then below him, each person is listed as in their relationship order to him and their age order. You can see at the top here, it does say son, Edwin Smith, son. That's a carryover from the previous page of the census. And then we go on to the next household, which is number 18 Wood Street, and has George Moore as the head of the household there. Then in this column, we can see the age at last birthday, listed in male and female. And this column is my absolute favourite, the profession or occupation of the people in the household. I do love to know what kind of jobs people did. So they've got some lovely, interesting jobs like a shoemaker and riveter down here, hosiery winder. So all sorts of different jobs that people did. Another column showing whether they were self-employed or an employer or worked from home. And a really important column here, which is where born. Now, the reason that this column is important, and it might be worth making a note of if you're researching your own family history where the person was born, is because when you start tracing back, this can be a constant that you can look for the person on previous censuses. And then the final column here just tells us whether the person had a disability. Obviously, these terms are quite outdated, so please don't take offence to them. And also, please be aware that often if this column was left empty, which often is. Ticks would be made in it to count and things like that. So a tick does not represent a disability. Usually it will say the disability, or it will say a number in that column, rather than just a tick if the person did have a disability. So if we take a look now, down at the bottom here, we'll find Joseph Atkins, who is currently the head of the household on this 1901 England census. The way I'm managing to navigate around this page is I'm just clicking and holding my mouse, and that allows me to scroll around the page. If you would like to make the image larger or smaller, there's little plus and minus buttons on the right hand side here to make it larger or smaller. So you can zoom out or zoom in, and zooming in can often make it a lot easier to read the handwriting. So here we are with Joseph Atkins, head of the household. And it looks like the column which tells me whether he's single or married, it says that he's a widower, and he's 67 years old. He's a hosiery warehouseman. He works for somebody else. And notably, he was born in Hinckley in Leicestershire. So he didn't just live in Hinckley in Leicestershire. The census is telling me that he was actually born in Hinckley in Leicestershire. And then we can see his children who live with him as well. So we've got John. And these marks here that say it looks like a DO on this document. It's just a ditto mark, which means the same as the above. So Joseph Atkins, and then it would be John J. Atkins, for example, for the son there, Estelle M. Atkins, etc. So just ditto marks there to tell us that it means just the same as the above. So John, 32 years old, a hosiery stockkeeper. Estella, Eleanor, Lily, and Ethel. So we're getting a lovely picture here of the household. Lots of older children, the youngest being 16, who's living there at the moment. And the girls, they're working as buttonhole machine hosiery workers, which is really interesting little detail to know. So if you imagine that this is your family that you found here, you might want to print this out, and you would do that by clicking on the crossed spanner and hammer just over on the right here above the zoom function, and the print button's just at the top. And it does have the functionality to print either a zoomed in version like this, or a complete document, depending on what you prefer. I personally prefer a nice zoomed in printout. It's easier to read. But if you wanted to get the whole picture of the whole street, you could print out the entire document as well. You can also send the document to yourself as well and email it to yourself using the download button. So that's a lovely example there. We found Joseph Atkins on this 1901 England census document. I've just had a question from Catherine Pabler asking, do libraries in other areas of the country make this available too? They often do. A lot of library services do have Ancestry Library Edition available for free if you join their local library service. I can't speak for individual authorities, but I do know that Leicestershire libraries definitely make this available. So if you did join Leicestershire Libraries online, you would be able to access Ancestry Library Edition. Please do put your questions in the chat there if you have any. I'm popping back occasionally to check them. So I'm going to head back out of this document now, now that we've found this 1901 England census. And the reason why you might be interested in censuses, if you're trying to look for family history information and trying to build up a pedigree chart, is because you can really track someone back through their life this way. So I think what we'll do now is have a look for Joseph Atkins, but on the 1891 census, which is 10 years earlier. So these censuses were taken every 10 years, and they're available 100 years after their publication as census, or when they were taken. So we're available up till the 1911 census at the moment. So if I just head back to this page, and now we can have a look down this list for the 1891 England census. And again, on the 1891 census, we are going to search for the same Joseph Atkins and see if we can find him 10 years earlier and see if anything has changed. So typing in his first name and his last name again, and then just clicking on Hinckley, Leicestershire, England on this drop-down menu. We don't need to put in any further information, although we do have his birth location now. So if you were doing this yourself, you might want to enter his birth location just to narrow down those search results. But I'm aware that the Joseph Atkins we want is hopefully going to come up when I click the search button. Okay, so here we are looking at the results for Joseph Atkins on the 1891 England census, 10 years before the 1901 England census. And you can see that the top result is looking, let's get that out of the way. The top result is looking quite likely as the Joseph Atkins that we want. The reason that we can tell that is because we can see that the birthplace matches, as we saw on the census from 1901, Hinckley, Leicestershire, England, as well as the residence Hinckley, Leicestershire. And his birth year is also matching there at the year 1834, which is what we expect and what it said on the previous census. So that's quite exciting that that might be the right person. Let's have a look at this record. So I'm going to go straight into viewing the original record. And again, just navigating in the same way by clicking and holding and pulling the document around to where I want it and then zooming in. Okay, so we've got quite a different picture here. It's just 10 years earlier, and Joseph Atkins is married, and his wife is still alive, Mary A. Atkins. So it looks like within those intervening 10 years, something tragic happened, and his wife seems to have passed away, and he became a widower. So we're building up a story here about Joseph Atkins. He's also changed his occupation. Here on the 1891 census, we can see that he was a drafter, and he changed his occupation to work in the hosiery warehouses later on. We can also see there were some different children living there 10 years earlier as well. I think that's Annie M. Clay, who's the daughter. Different surname, so perhaps married, but was there on the day of the census. It doesn't mean necessarily that people were living there if they're listed on the census. They weren't necessarily residing at that particular address. It's just that when the census collector came to knock on the door, that person happened to be there. So perhaps Annie was visiting that day when the census collector came along, and perhaps she usually lived with Mr. Clay, who has the same surname as her. We can't be entirely sure, but it's nice to get that little snapshot. Sometimes it will say visitor rather than daughter, or if it was just a friend, perhaps visitor in that column as relationship to head of the household. And then we can see John. We can see his son Percival, so that's a change as well from before. Eva, Alice, Agnes, Eleanor, Lilla and Ethel and Cecil there, a lodger that they've got. So Cecil Fuller, quite an unusual listing there, that they had a lodger of 29 who was a bank official as well. Scholar just means that the children were at school. And then we've got Agnes as mother's helper. And we've got some dressmakers living there as well. And his son John was a hosiery warehouseman at that time. So if we look across, we can see that the information's matching there, that it was in Leicestershire, Hinckley. So it's likely that we've got the correct family here and that we're tracing back the correct person who we want to, Joseph Atkins. Let me head back. So now we're going to take a trip even further back in time to 1841, to the 1841 England census. So if I find that on this list, there we go, 1841 England census. And we're going to try to find the same Joseph Atkins on the 1841 England census. So you might be asking, why are we going so far back in time to look for Joseph Atkins? Well, the reason is a lot of people like to build up a family tree in terms of getting further and further back in history and tracing their ancestors further and further back. And one way to do this is to estimate when you think that the person that you're looking for might have been a child. You can then look at them on the census when they might have been a child in that year, and then you'll be able to see who their parents are. So you can actually build up a family tree there using that information. But you do have to be careful, just a quick word of warning, because it can be a bit tricky when you're researching a real family tree, just to make sure that that person that you've traced way back in time is the correct person. So just a word of warning there, but we'll come on to how you verify that in a moment. So let's look again for Joseph Atkins. And in the lived in box, we're just going to put the same information again, Hinckley, Leicestershire, England, and then we're going to do a search. I'm just going to check for any questions. Okay, I can't see any questions on the chat at the moment, but do ask questions if you have any. I'd be very happy to do so. Okay, so now we've got the listing, the records results for the 1841 England census for Joseph Atkins. We've traced him back in time, and again, it's the top result that we've got here. Now, this is something to be aware of. You might notice that the estimated birth year is slightly different from before. So it was 1834 before, but now we've got 1833 as the estimated birth year. So it's worth thinking about whether that's within kind of parameters that you're willing to accept. The reason being that sometimes people weren't sure what year they were born in. They would estimate that and they may get it wrong. Sometimes they weren't sure where they were born as well. So it's worth widening your search if you think that someone should be on a particular census but you can't find them there. So let's have a look at this record, even though the estimated birth year is slightly out. And then we're just going to go straight in to having a look at the transcript here. So Joseph Atkins, estimated to be about aged 8, estimated birth year 1833 on this 1841 England census. And scrolling down, we can see a transcript of who was in the household at that time. So we can see Joseph Atkins, just the second to youngest child there at the age of 8, and his sister Mary Atkins, age 6. And then the parents there, we assume, Robert Atkins and Anne Atkins, and some other brothers and sisters there living in the house with him. So let's have a look at the record. Now you can see this 1841 census is a little bit more tricky to read, faded, and there is less information on it than there was on either the 1891 or the 1901 census that we looked at previously. So if we scroll down and zoom in, we can take a look at the Atkins household. So there we've got Robert Atkins, 40 years of age. We've got birthplace as Stockingen on this particular census, but we can barely read the names of the other children. They're very difficult to make out. Before we go on to the next household down the street. So just to be aware that censuses have less and less information on the further and further you go back in history. So some of them can be a bit tricky to read and have less information on there that you can glean for your family history research. So now we've traced Joseph Atkins right back to 1841, and censuses don't go back much further than this. So now we need to have a look at how we can perhaps verify how we know whether Joseph we're looking at the right Joseph. We can find out more information about his marriage and things like that. Just going to check if there's any questions before I go on to birth, marriage and death records. Okay, I can't see any questions in the chat there, but as I say, do feel free to ask as you wish. Okay, we're going to take a look now at birth, marriage and death records. So I'm just going to head right back to the beginning so I can show you from the beginning of Ancestry how to get onto those birth, marriage and death records. So if you remember, right back at the beginning of the session, we were on this first page on Ancestry. And to start off any search, best to click begin searching. And then on the right, we just have a look for special collections, and we're after the birth, marriage and death records. So I'm just going to click on that one. And we do need to narrow this down even further to when it was likely that Joseph Atkins was getting married. So I'm going to click on the England and Wales Civil Registration Marriage Index 1837 to 1915. And what I'm going to do now is just type in Joseph Atkins again. So just pop Atkins in the last name box there. And we're going to put Hinckley in the marriage box as he lived there all his life and was born there. And I'm just going to click on the orange search button. So before I go any further with this, let me just explain why you might want to look for birth, marriage and death records and the difference between those and parish records. So marriage records are really helpful because they are often a full marriage certificate and you can get loads of information. You can get father's occupation. You can often find out who their friends were, perhaps by who the witnesses were and things like that. So there's loads of information on marriage certificates. They also confirm your findings from the census. So you can look at the census and compare it and see whether those match up, and if they do, then it's likely that you've perhaps got the right person. The difference between birth, marriage and death records and parish records. So parish records list the baptisms or christenings, the marriages and the funerals for local people. And parish records can often be found in your local library or in your local archives or record office. So they can be found for free, which is really helpful. But bear in mind that obviously baptisms and christenings will happen sometime after the birth, so the date will be different from the actual birth date, and funerals obviously can happen a few weeks or months after the death, so your date of funeral and date of death will be different. Marriages will obviously be the same. The other thing to bear in mind about parish records is that we have an agreement with what we call conformist records, which tend to be Church of England records. So we have full sets in libraries and archives of conformist records. Any other records, which are called non-conformist records, they can be Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, and so on. We have some of those records, but we don't have an agreement to have all of those records. So you may not find a full set of those records available either on Ancestry, in your local library, or in your local archives or record office. It may be that you would have to go to the church and actually get the records from them. So something to bear in mind. But what we're looking at here is the actual marriage records for Joseph Atkins. So I'm going to click on the first record here and click View Record. And unfortunately, what we don't have here is the marriage certificate, which would be in the parish records. We just have index reference to the marriage record. You can order that from the General Registry Office. So you would just have to go on over using Google to the General Registry Office and use these details that are on the screen now for them to send you the marriage certificate. That does cost between £7 and £9, I believe, at the moment. The other alternative is that you could look the parish records up in your local library when we're hopefully open again, or you could try to check out parish records on Ancestry, but not all of them have been uploaded, so they can be a little bit patchy, those records. This view record, I know we've been clicking view record before to have a look at more detail. Unfortunately, in this case, it is just a listing of names, so it doesn't provide any extra information. And then down here, you can see below this index reference, we've got the records on the page. So we've got Joseph Atkins, Thomas Dalton, George Dennis, Mary Ann Foxon and Mary Hopewell listed on this particular entry. So what we can assume from this, though we can't be entirely sure, is that Joseph Atkins married Mary Ann Foxon. And the reason for that is that on the census, on the 1891 census, we saw that his wife was listed as Mary Ann. And here we've got a Mary Ann Foxon. So we can make an assumption that Mary Ann's surname before marriage, her maiden name, was Foxon. However, it may be that he was married to Mary Hopewell. We can't be 100% sure without actually seeing that marriage certificate. So that's why it can be worth ordering certificates if you really want to look into something and find out whether that person was actually married to the person that you expected. So I can't see any further questions here. So what I'll go on to do now is show you some extra searching on Ancestry as well. Some really interesting records are available if you can only know how to find them. So I'm going to head back to the front page now. We're going to leave Joseph Atkins for now. Okay, so on Ancestry, as you noticed when we click begin searching, you do get a lot of historical records available down the right hand side. You can explore by location. So if you wanted to look at records from South America, for example, you could click there and you could have a look that way. The easiest way I find to look at different records is to click on the card catalogue, which is over here just by the special collections heading. And in the card catalogue, it allows you to filter down to have a look at some specialist records. So we will take a look, I think, to start off with at some military records. So if you ignore the results that are down the right hand side, that just lists all of the things that are available on Ancestry as records. But here we're just going to click on military. And then I'm going to filter this by collection to draft, enlistment and service. And I'm going to filter down to just Europe. And then I'm going to filter again to the UK. And because I'm looking in particular for some World War I draft and enlistment records, I'm going to filter this down to 1910s. So you can see all the filters that we've applied here on the left. And then if I scroll down, you can see the UK British Army World War I service records, 1914 to 1920. So the reason that I've really honed in on these service records is that they really do provide stunning amounts of detail about the individuals that they list. You've got everything from the chest measurements of soldiers to what qualifications they did whilst they were in the army, if they were injured, how that went for them. Really great detail, amazing for social history research and for your own interests. Something to bear in mind is that during the Blitz, a lot of the records were destroyed in a fire, a bombing, because they were housed in a place where the bomb hit and then it was set on fire. So you will find that a lot of these records are unfortunately missing, which can be quite frustrating. But when you get hold of one, they are really interesting to look at. So I'm going to take a look at this example of William Barton. I'm going to put his lived in place as Spondon in Derby. And then just click the search button as we did before. So here we've got the UK British Army World War I service records 1914 to 1920 results for William Barton. And I know that this second record down, having had a look at this, is really quite interesting. So I'm just going to click on that and then click view. And in order to fully appreciate these records, you do have to look through them. So whilst the first page has some information on, so we've even got his height there, 6 foot 3/4 inches, apparent age 24 years and 7 months. So his chest measurement there as well. But there's even more information. If we use this right hand button, it's a little arrow pointing to the right, so we can scroll through the different documents that are available in his record. So we've got an identity certificate, a little note that was written about him, some discharge documents. Here are his discharge documents. And then we've got some more medical records as well. Why he was discharged. Certificate of being discharged. And we've even got things like vaccination marks, a tattoo information. So really detailed records, and well worth having a look at if you suspect that you had a relative drafted in World War One. So we're just going to head back and I'm going to show you some other records, which I think I promised the records for the Titanic. So please bear with me while I go back through these documents. One moment. Just going to share a different screen. Okay, so we're back to the beginning here, and I'm just going to show you how to search for the Titanic records now. So we'll head back into the card catalogue as we did before. This is where we look for all special records. And this time we're going to click on Immigration and Travel. And then we are going to set it to Europe and United Kingdom. And if we then set that to passenger lists, So here in the middle of the screen, you can see that we've got the UK RMS Titanic crew records 1912 and the UK RMS Titanic deaths at sea 1912. So let's have a look at the crew records. And I think when I did this search before, just to demonstrate what the records look like, I think I put something like John Smith. Just did a search based on that to see what we get. Might not have a John Smith now. Oh, we do. We've got a variety of J. Smiths. So let's view the record. And if I view this record, we've got a photograph of the crew Titanic records, which is just a lovely thing to see with some information there. And that just gives you an idea of the range of records that are available on Ancestry for you to view. So here we've got information, the date, the place, Christian name and surname of deceased, sex and age, rank of profession and occupation. So very similar information to the census. And I just wanted to emphasize as well, if you do check the 1911 census out on Ancestry, you'll find even more in-depth information about people that you might be researching on there as well. So that's all of the records and research that I've got to share with you today. I do hope you've enjoyed this session and that you will try out Ancestry for yourself. As I say, if you join Leicestershire Libraries, you can use Ancestry for free from home, well, Ancestry Library Edition, free from home at the moment. Other library services often make Ancestry available as well. Normally we would use it in the library, but hopefully we will be able to access the library again soon so that you'll be able to use a computers there and use Ancestry through it. The other service that we offer for family history research is Find My Past, and you can get on there as well. It's got some more specialist Leicester and Leicestershire records on it, so you might find a more of an in-depth look at the local area on there. So it's well worth checking out. You can also access that from home for free as well at the moment with a Leicestershire Library library card number and PIN. So I do hope that this has inspired you to try out researching your family history for yourself. Do give it a go, and hopefully I'll be able to make some handouts available. So if you wanted to work through the Joseph Atkins example yourself, using those census records and those birth, marriage and death records to kind of get to grips with ancestry searching, you'd definitely be able to do that using those handouts, and hopefully I'll be able to make those available through this page. So I do hope you have a lovely rest of your evening or afternoon, and it was lovely to join you all here on Virtual Village Hall. Thank you.